I was never particularly interested in photography per se. What I was always interested in was natural history. So I think from a very, very early age, I just surrounded myself by wildlife. My father sort of got me going, if you like. He was a great amateur naturalist. He loved the outdoors. He loved nature. And he taught me patience.
Hi there, Carl Browne here with you. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Feel free to like, subscribe, and come with me in my time tunnel and let's see what's there behind there for you. Hi there, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Yes, and what's been happening, I can tell you, I've been up and about and it's good to be with you too. Want to look at today at someone I met in the month of August, and this is at the International Bird Fair. Actually, I was very impressed when I met with him. His name is Pete Oxford. Now, Pete is one of the greatest, and I said a top photographer, and what he has done during his time, and he still is photographing, making lots of photographs, he's produced two great books on Guyana. One is called Rupununi, and this book is absolutely fantastic. Rupununi, and the other one is Undiscovered Guyana, and that is a book which he also produced. It's called, there we go, this book is called Undiscover Guyana. Fantastic photographs. I mean, when you look at some of the pictures that Pete has produced in this book, it's amazing. One of the good things about that is that I caught up with him at the International Bird Fair, and when I met him at the bird fair, I mean, it was interesting to meet someone so dynamic, a great photographer, yet so simple. And I decided to have an interview with him, a chat, just in an interview, it was a chat. And I said to Pete, hey, can we talk about your life and a bit about that? The good thing about that is that I had previously on my, if you look on previous programs that I've done on the Bird Fair, which is this year, you'd see a bit of him. But I decide now, Pete needs his platform. And I would like to present to you Mr. Pete Oxford, fantastic photographer, to tell you a little bit about his life and what he thinks about Guyana and also what he's doing. He's moving now to live in South Africa, but more on that as I introduce to you my guest, Mr. Pete Oxford.
My name is Pete Oxford. I'm British, wildlife photographer, basically concentrating in natural history, anything. I'm basically interested in everything, and a lot of cultural stuff as well. So I spend my life traveling around the world, working for magazines on a freelance basis, more or less. Done all kinds of articles, very wide-ranging articles. And one of the places that I have been to fairly often and done quite a lot of work is Guyana, your beautiful country. So I love it there. I've got lots of friends there, and I've been there many times. I actually first went out to Guyana, I can't even remember how long ago it was, but it was significantly long ago, through a very good friend of mine, Graham Watkins. And Graham and I actually went to university with Graham's brother. And then Graham and I met in the coast of Ecuador, where he came to live where I was already living. And that was about 30 odd years ago. And then he went, as many of you know, to work in Iwakrama. He was the director of Iwakrama. And he called me out. He said, Pete, you've got to come and see this country. It's an amazing country. So I went out and we started photographing, and I really enjoyed it. And I ended up going back with Graham and spent a lot of time in the Rupununi area, in between Iwakrama and the Rupununi savannas, and we did quite a lot of traveling, made quite a lot of friends there, and ended up with enough material to produce a book, which is this one here. This is Rupununi, Rediscovering a Lost World. And Graham came up with the title because it really is, after Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Lost World, which could well have been set in Guyana. We felt it was time that Guyana got the recognition that it deserves as a tourist destination. So the book is aimed at being educational, but also trying to highlight the beauty, the natural beauty of both the wildlife and the people, and the simplistic way of living of many of the Amerindian communities, which to ourselves as outsiders is another beautiful aspect of Guyana. You know, many people in the Western world strive to better themselves, and the way they think they can do that is by acquiring more possessions and a faster car and a newer car and all that kind of thing. But actually, what we all strive for is peace and tranquility, which is really what you find when you go out into places like the Rupununi, and that's what sucks you in, and that's what really makes you want to. I mean, every time I go there, I sort of get this deep feeling, hell, I could just stay. You know, this is where I want to be. And it's that sort of primordial sense of taking you back to a natural state of relaxation and tranquility. So, yeah, that was the first book we did, and then the second book, just for the 50th.
Okay, if we interrupt, before we go into the 50th, Rupununi, because I mean it's very intriguing, looking at the Rupununi rediscovering a lost world. How challenging was this for you, getting this book together?
You know, I wouldn't consider it challenging really, because at the end of the day, I spend a lot of time in rainforests. I spend my whole life basically out in the natural world. So things that some people may find challenging for one reason or another, I might not. I might find it more challenging to find my way downtown LA, an area in which some people feel very comfortable. So I don't think challenging was the right word. I wanted to try and be as all-encompassing as possible, and that was really probably the greatest challenge, to end up deciding what gets included, what gets left out of a book. We wanted to try and show it in its best light, highlight some of the issues, but I think that was the greatest challenge, is what do you leave out?
And then you move on to the second one, which was...
Yeah, just in the 50th celebration of the independence of Guyana from the Brits, myself included. I was commissioned by the government of Guyana actually to produce a second book, which is called Undiscovered Guyana, with emphasis on the word ovo, which is in discovered. And so we flew the country. We flew mostly in the GDF helicopters, and got a different perspective. And the idea of that book was really to celebrate the country for the Guyanese, not so much for the outsider, but it's surprising to me, it always has been surprising to me, how few Guyanese know their own country. And you've got a huge percentage of the population, the countrywide population, living on the coastal strip, and very few of them have ever ventured into what you know as the interior. And both of these books that we produced, the aim is to try and redress that balance and show people that it's not a big green nasty hell, it's actually a wonderful place to be, and to encourage people, Guyanese themselves, to get out into the hinterland, into the interior, and discover for themselves what their country has to offer. I also have a travel company, Pete Oxford Expeditions, and that's why we're here now in Rutland Bird Fair, trying to promote the trips that I lead. And I do actually have two Guyana trips for next year. I was in Guyana this year leading a trip. I was in Guyana last year leading a trip, bringing in foreign tourists. And I've already got two trips set up for next year already, 2019 next year. Yeah. So you know, I'm plugging away, seeing what I can do to help, and trying to encourage as many people as I can to come and visit.
So all in all, we can say that Guyana looks really great for the future, from your end of things.
Yes, it's definitely a destination I like coming to, and one of the reasons I like coming, which is not good for Guyana, is because not that many other people do come, and I think that will change. But I also think that it needs tweaking. There are things we can do to improve it, or things that you, the Guyanese, can do to improve it, in details and whatever. The international travellers come to expect a certain degree of comfort, and I don't want to promote luxury in Guyana by any means, but I do want to promote attention to detail. And apart from that, you know, I don't want the Guyanese to get complacent because they think they're going to be into this huge big richness of oil. I'd like to see where that goes. I'd like to be a fly on the wall for 5 minutes in 20 years' time and see if it really ever happened. It's my way of thinking is it's not going to happen like many people have hoped it might. So let's forget oil and go back to tourism and concentrate on that, and let oil, if it happens properly, let it be a bonus. But let's bring Guyana up in a nice, controlled, respectable way, looking after its nature, looking after its resources, getting rid of illegal mining, getting rid of mercury use, getting rid of all those things that are hurting you and giving you the bad reputation internationally. And let's work on it. Let's be a place that like many other countries, some of their first or second major income is from ecotourism, and that could easily happen in Guyana. You've only got just over 1 million people in the country anyway. Not a lot of mouths to feed, and I think that wealth from the ecotourists can spread out nicely if it's carefully done, if it's nicely done. I think that's what it takes.
Pete, about your life, what made you get involved into photography in the first place? How did it all happen for you?
I was never particularly interested in photography per se. What I was always interested in was natural history. So I think from a very, very early age, I just surrounded myself by wildlife. My father sort of got me going, if you like. He was a great amateur naturalist. He loved the outdoors. He loved nature. And he taught me patience, how to sit and watch. He taught me how to watch animals from a very, very early age. My first pet was a wild snake that he caught when I was 4 years old, and I've loved snakes ever since. It's definitely, he was very influential. And so I decided, I don't know, fairly young in my life, 16, 18 years old, something like that I was never going to do anything I didn't want to do. And I've always tried to live by that, and I've tried to even if I might have been desperate for money, I didn't want to go and work in a bar because it wasn't what I was going to do. I'd rather go out somewhere to the Falkland Islands or somewhere like that and volunteer or get a job out there. But in fact, that's what I did do one time. I was a fisheries observer, for example, in the Falkland Islands on these foreign fishing vessels. And that kind of thing has always been driven. It's always been behind what I wanted to do. And with regard to photography, I was a naturalist guide, first of all, in the Galapagos Islands. I used to live in the Galapagos. Been living in Ecuador for 33 years. And then I went around the world just on my own, wondering what I really wanted to do, trying to find myself, trying to find the best place to set up and live. Almost settled in Zimbabwe, which was fantastic at the time. It's been run down since, unfortunately. But then I went to the jungle, to the Amazon rainforest, and I lived out there for 3 years in the forest. And I got picked up by an international travel company, and they asked me to come and work for them, which I did. Went down to Antarctica and became expedition leader down there. In the high Arctic and what have you, and of course I took a camera with me. And it was early days. There were only 2 boats going down to Antarctica in those days, tourist boats, and so we were getting some pretty unusual stuff. I remember getting my first break, if you like, as a photographer was when we went up into the Chukchi Sea, through the Bering Straits, between Russia and the States, turn left, and then you're in the Chukchi Sea and the Chukotka Peninsula, full of pack ice and some very seldom visited peoples. They're beautiful people up there, but we were the first white non-Russians ever to go there for the last 50 years. So it was quite an adventure. And on that particular trip, I managed to get some really nice shots of polar bears. Which again, it was sort of relatively early in the day, and people hadn't seen pictures of polar bears out in the Chukchi Sea very much. And I came home, my wife's, Renee, my wife, her parents were doctors, and they said, well, there's a doctor's magazine, you must just post them in there, see if they'll publish them. And I said, well, no, I'd never published anything before. And it turned out that once I submitted them, they they thought they were the best thing that they'd seen for a while. They gave me front cover, a whole pull-out section of the magazine to keep as a separate edition. They gave me a big feature article and all thing, and I thought, well, this is easy, you know, I could get into photography. And of course it was never that easy again, and there's lots and lots of competition. But what photography does for me, and the reason I became a photographer, was because I knew two things. I knew I wanted to travel, and I knew that I wanted to be out in wildlife, and the combination of those two things worked well as a photographer. So I became a photographer, and I am a full-time professional photographer. I do have a travel business now, taking people to the destinations that I've enjoyed so much over the years, and trying to share my passion with them for these same places. But photography, the second thing is about photography. It's although I am a photographer, that's how I make my living. I don't consider myself really a photographer. I don't do it for the photography. I'm a photographer mostly because it's a tool for conservation, because an image is a very powerful thing. It transcends gender barriers, race barriers, age barriers, and all those kind of barriers that the written word might have in getting a message across. And I think that an image, the other advantage of an image is it's instantaneous. So, you know, in a millisecond you can get a message, a very strong message, if you use the right kind of photography, to the audience that you're looking at. And as I say, you reach a very wide audience, and it is a very powerful tool for conservation. So that's how I like to use my photography. In 2005, we formed a group. There are, I think, about 40 of us, professional wildlife photographers, called together by Christina Mittermeier, and we formed what's called the International League of Conservation Photographers. And the idea behind that was to put any egos aside, collaborate together, and use photography as a tool for conservation on a group effort. And it's become very successful, very powerful. We've actually lobbied quite hard, and even some national parks have been created through this direct use of photography to the right people, the people in power. So that's really how it started, and why I continue in it. Although, having said that, photography as a business is failing. There are more images now being seen and looked at than ever before, but far few being bought. Because everyone's now a photographer, everyone's got their own camera, and even if it's a cell phone in their pocket, and all these photographers, most of them have got other jobs, so they don't need the money from photography, so they're quite prepared to have them published for the sake of seeing their pictures published in magazines for free, or undercutting the needs of the professional photographer, who has to maintain himself in the field by earning money, just like the rest of us. So that's an issue. So it is unfortunately a dying business, at least in the editorial side, which is where I am in the magazines and stuff. In commercial and wedding and all that kind of photography, it's still very much alive. So how long it will actually go on, in that sense, I'm not sure, but that's where it all stemmed from.
What advice would you offer to the young upcoming photographer who would like to achieve as much as you have in the world?
Well, you already have upcoming photographers in Guyana, some of whom are exceptional, and the first name that comes to mind is Kester Clark, for example. And I'd like to congratulate him on the images that I'm seeing on his Facebook, and I think that's fantastic that you have Guyanese in Guyana, passionate about their own country, and from Guyanese to Guyanese it's a much easier pitch, easier to tell the story often than a foreigner like myself coming in and trying to impress on somebody the issues maybe, and perhaps the beauty, because they see me as possibly somebody who's more able to travel around the country than they are for one reason or another. But it's very important to all of us that the Guyanese actually get out there, learn to love their own country, and everybody should be out there taking pictures with their cell phones anyway and coming back and appreciate that. But it's also about taking pictures of the issues and coming back with those images, lobbying the ministers and trying to help Guyana on its way towards being the green country that it's promised to be. It is already a very easy country to manage in the sense there's so few people. There are 1 million plus people in a large, huge, relatively pristine area. So it's really shouldn't be that hard. But politics often gets in the way, and greed often gets in the way, and that's a problem. But it is something that we should all be concerned about. I'm a Guyana-phile. I've been there many times, and I like the country very much. And so it's, as much as I can do to help, I'd like to, yeah.
With that, Pete, I'd say thank you very much. There's much more I can ask you, but you know what? It's been so interesting.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Hi, thank you for looking, thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. Let's meet again, and feel free to subscribe. Carl Browne here with you saying it has been a pleasure being with you.